Welcome back to another edition of Racing Rundown Around the World. On today's segment, we've got two races that we're going to talk about, both of them at Goodwood on the week that includes the Goodwood Cup. Obviously, as you can see that right now, that's not the first race we're going to talk about, though. I do briefly want to discuss the Sussex Stakes, and when I say briefly, I mean very briefly. I will put out a slight disclaimer. Declarations have not yet been made for this race, but I don't feel like waiting the extra 5 or 6 hours that it's going to be until declarations are made. And since we know that Baid's going to win this race and it's not really going to be close, I'm not going to waste any time or wait for that and just say right now we know this Baid's going to win the race. So obviously Baid is the pick in the Sussex. We'll move on to the race that's actually competitive, and that's the Goodwood Cup. And I'm very fascinated to see this matchup. You have the two runners from the Ascot Gold Cup, Kyprios and Stradivarius. We thought there might have been a bit of a changing of the guard at Ascot. We'll discuss whether or not Stradivarius can turn the tables on Kyprios and win a fifth Goodwood Cup, or if the changing of the guard that we thought we might have seen at Ascot is going to continue. You also add impressive winner Trushan and a couple other interesting runners here that we will discuss. So we'll get into Kyprios first. Obviously, I've been talking about him a bunch. Very, very strong victory in the Ascot Gold Cup last time. And the runs leading up to that, couple of wins going 1.75 miles. And that was a big question that we had about Kiprios on Racing Rundown going into that Ascot Gold Cup. Was he going to see out the step up in distance from the 1.75 miles all the way up to the 2.5 miles? And he did. It was a very, very good run for him. Strong runner-up effort strong runner-up effort from Mojo Star. Strong effort to hold off Mojo Star there with Stradivarius third. I'll get into the problems that happened with Stradivarius in a couple minutes, and I do apologize for not having that race chart pulled up beforehand. But obviously, a lot to like about Kyprios, and he brings the connections with him as well. So even if you had questions about whether or not the Ascot Gold Cup win was legitimate, which I don't really understand why you would have those questions at this point, but that is an extra point in his corner. And there's a lot I think to like about Kyprios. Obviously, I sound kind of stupid saying that because it's self-explanatory, but there's a lot to like about Kyprios in this race, but I don't think he's unbeatable. And I want to get to talking about that run at Ascot, and it's where we have to get to Stradivarius. We'll scroll back up to the top here. Stradivarius had a mountain of problems at Ascot. He was held in for basically the entire second half of the race, and you can see the entire time Frankie wants to get him out. And Kyprios had the better trip throughout the majority of the Ascot Gold Cup, and Frankie didn't get out until almost midway through the stretch. And if you go back to the Ascot recap episode on Racing Rundown, I gave a lot of credit to Ryan Moore and Rosa Ryan, the riders of Kyprios and Mojo Star, respectively, for the race riding that they did because they held in Stradivarius and they made it so Frankie had to angle him all the way out, come from the center of the course, and by that point, Kyprios had to break on them, and Kyprios wasn't going to come back to them, Stradivarius and Frankie Dettori, from that moment in the race. So that was the big difference, I thought, at Ascot in the Gold Cup, was that Stradivarius didn't get out. And I think if Stradivarius had gotten out sooner, or if roles were reversed, if Stradivarius got the trip that Kyprios got, then I think Stradivarius could have won the Ascot Gold Cup. If you go back a year ago to 2021, Stradivarius had probably more trouble in the Ascot Gold Cup, but I thought Stradivarius ran better in this year's Gold Cup than he did in 2021's Gold Cup. Now, there is supplementary factors adding to that, but I will say, and one of those being that the trouble was worse in 2021 than it was in 2020. But I will say, I thought Stradivarius ran a very good race at Ascot, and he had a nice trial victory at York coming into the race. So it makes sense that Stradivarius was going to run a good effort there. And the thing I will say, last year, he lost by 7.25 lengths at Ascot, and he followed it up with two subsequent victories at York and one in the Doncaster Cup. So Stradivarius has done this before, where he's lost a race and come back and run well. So I think Stradivarius is going to run really well in this race, and I just, absent a lot of trouble, which obviously that's the big thing with him, but if he can avoid having serious trouble and getting held in the whole time and not being able to get out until very close to the end of the race. And I think Stradivarius has a very good chance to turn the table on Kyprios. We'll go now to Trueshan, who was originally my pick in the Ascot Gold Cup. And I think I kind of got a little bit lucky with Trueshan coming out and then having to hop onto Mojo Star because he does tend to do his best running the softer the ground is. Now, he does have some success over good going, so I don't think that the pick was bad, and I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility for him to run a winning effort in this race, but I'm going to err on the side of, the softer the ground, the better he is, and there are two better horses in Stradivarius and Kyprios who have proven themselves on the good and good to firm going. So even though I like Trueshan and Ascot, and I don't necessarily think the ground is going to be a problem for him, that when you have three horses that in my mind are so close to each other, that's going to be the difference maker with Trueshan this time. But his effort at Newcastle last time, very good effort. There was a lot of people that were saying a lot of really nice things about that effort, and you really can't say anything bad about it. So that's where I am with Trueshan, but I will not be picking him this time. I do want to talk about one horse that really intrigued me. I wasn't bold enough to take him on top, but that's Coltrey, who is coming out of a very nice victory in a listed stake at Sandown, which was going 2 miles, which is the same distance of this effort. Going back earlier at Royal Ascot, he won going 2.5 miles, so the same distance as the Ascot Gold Cup, but that was in a handicap. And then his only defeat of the year on the turf was at Chester, where he was beaten a neck by Cleveland, who's a pretty good runner for Aidan O'Brien. But that was a race that was 2 miles and 2.5 furlongs. I don't have the conversion off the top of my head right there, so that's what it is in the furlongs. But he was in front at about where 2 miles would be in this race. So I was debating going with him in this spot. I ultimately decided not to, just because I wanted to go with the proven class. I'll get to who my pick is there. But I do think Coltrey is going to run a very strong race in here. He would be a horse that I would pick or use in some kind of place facet here, even over whichever one of Kyprios or Stradivarius you don't use, because I do think, especially coming out of a 10-length victory at Sandown and showing that the distance is no problem for him, and the turf isn't an issue for him either. I like a lot of things about Coltrey. And then the one other horse that I will highlight is obviously Princess Zoe, who was the runner-up in the Ascot Gold Cup in 2021. She ran okay in this year's Ascot Gold Cup. She was 6 beaten, 6 3/4 lengths. Did have a good trial going into that, and kind of hit or miss all across the board with Princess Zoe. On her best day, she does give strong placing efforts, and the price you're getting right now in the markets, you could certainly get a good price from her and turn that into a place effort. But I think Coltrey is a little bit more intriguing for me, and obviously the market does agree with me in that facet. But ultimately, in this race, I decided to go with Stradivarius. Old habits die hard. Maybe it feels like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, because he certainly hasn't been the Stradivarius of 2019 and 2020. But I'll go back to something that Richard Hoyle said in the post-race call of that Ascot Gold Cup. And quoting him, he said, "The fire still burns, but maybe not quite as brightly with Stradivarius." And that's what I'm going to hope for with Stradivarius, that maybe he isn't the old Stradivarius. Maybe he isn't the Stradivarius of 2019 and 2020. But there is something still there. And that's what his closing half of the stretch at Ascot told me, is that there's still something there with him, and just getting a little bit of better luck in this race, I gotta try it again with Stradivarius. Old habits die hard, but Stradivarius, he's gonna run a big one every time. He hasn't ever lost at Goodwood either. 4 Goodwood Cup victories. He's gonna try for 5 in here. I think he's gonna get it. He's gonna be my pick, and I'm gonna use him with Coltrey, and then obviously Kyprios, because you do have to respect the effort that he's had there. But I'm going to try one more time with Stradivarius. This probably would be the last time I pick him if he were to not win this race. But I think, given all the trouble that he had at Ascot, you have to give him another go. With that being said, that's it for this segment of Racing Running Around the World. Stradivarius, Coltrey, Kyprios, Baid in the Sussex. We'll see you later on this week, where we'll talk about the Nassau Stakes, also at Goodwood. Have a good one. We'll see you then.